All right. Due to some circumstances, several of the Genesis chapters were not recorded, and I'm going to record them in the style that they've been recorded in the Bible study that goes on each week, and I'll just fill in the missing material. So, Genesis 11. And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone, and slime they had they for mortar. And they said, Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we scatter abroad upon the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower, which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them, which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore the name of it is called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. So this is obviously called the Tower of Babel story, where God judged the people of the earth who were not doing what he said, and this introduces languages throughout the world. So after getting off the ark, the people were supposed to replenish the earth, and that, in a sense, was expecting them to spread out. Now, God had given man the opportunity to eat animals now, and the animals feared man, so they would be spreading out, and man would be pursuing them. But we have a city here called Babel, and you have to go back to Genesis 10 to read about Nimrod and him being a mighty hunter. And he built Babel as well as some other cities. And the thought is he was a good hunter, and so he brought the food to the people. And so they congregated in cities, and they had the vain idea of, we'll build a tower and we'll worship God the way we want, and we'll make a name for ourselves. And what happens here is the beginning of idolatry, which can be shown by looking into Joshua and some other passages after Genesis that show that this is where idolatry began. And so God has essentially achieved what he wanted. He spread out the people and got them to move apart, maybe perhaps due to fear of not being able to understand one another. Now, a verse that people, in my opinion, misuse is verse 7, which says, Go to, let us go down and confound their language. And this is where the Trinity is taught. And just like we saw earlier in Genesis, there's some us verses, which we can attribute to some angels being present. And while it looks like there are no angels here, you have to go and study angels in great detail to have this understanding. But God does things using the angels. And so a particular verse which we will look at is Deuteronomy 4:19. And it says, Lest thou lift up thine eyes unto heaven, and when thou seest the sun and the moon and the stars, even all the host of heaven, shouldest be driven to worship them and serve them, which the Lord thy God hath divided unto all nations under the whole heaven. So what that verse is saying is God has assigned the host of heaven, which we can say are angels, over the nations of the earth. They didn't want to worship God, and so God gave them up to worship gods or angels. And so that's who would be present, in my opinion, in Genesis 11. So God says he went down and he saw what happened, and he says, let us go down. And I think he takes these angels and he assigns probably a hierarchy, one with others beneath, to each nation, giving them a language. They're not a nation yet, but they will be. So to me, this is a better explanation than having the Trinity just show up out of nowhere But that's what people teach, so you'll have to keep that in mind. All right, so you could probably get more out of that passage. Like they didn't want to use God's materials, so they made their own brick for stone and slime for mortar. So the people were rebellious and they wanted to do things without God, kind of like today. So let's continue. Verse 10. These are the generations of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begat Arphaxad 2 years after the flood. And Shem lived after he begat Arphaxad 500 years and begat sons and daughters. And Arphaxad lived 35 years and begat Selah. And Arphaxad lived after he begat Selah 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Selah lived 30 years and begat Eber. And Selah lived after he begat Eber 403 years and begat sons and daughters. And Eber lived 430 years and begat Peleg. And Eber lived after he begat Peleg 430 years and begat sons and daughters. And Peleg lived 30 years and begat Reu. And Peleg lived after he begat Reu 209 years and begat sons and daughters. And Reu lived 32 years and begat Serug. And Reu lived after he begat Serug 207 years and begat sons and daughters. And Serug lived 30 years and begat Nahor. And Serug lived after he begat Nahor 200 years and begat sons and daughters. And Nahor lived 20 years and begat Terah. And Nahor lived after he begat Terah 119 years and begat sons and daughters. And Terah lived 70 years and begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran. So let me stop there, and we'll read the rest in a bit. But you have the genealogy going down to Abraham, or Abram, at this point. And we also have a recording of the number of years the people were living. So you'll notice if you write it all down in kind of a table, maybe even graph it, that the lifespans are getting shorter. So I don't know how God accomplished that, but people aren't going to live as long. And you'll have some other generations recorded, and eventually you started getting down about 120 years in the time of Moses. And when you get to the time of, say, David and Solomon, it's getting down to about 80, which seems to have persisted. So that's some interesting information here. Also, some of these names appear in chapter 10, and you have to read chapter 10 and chapter 11 together. Chapter 10 tells us the earth was divided, and the nations were divided in the time of Peleg, and that's, as far as I understand, when the Tower of Babel would have occurred. And so you have some generations after that, and I think Abraham is called a Hebrew, and so he probably the language of Hebrew probably comes from Eber. So we'll pick up in verse 27. Now these are the generations of Terah. Terah begat Abram, Nahor, and Haran begat Lot. And Haran died before his father Terah in the land of his nativity in Ur of the Chaldees. And Abram and Nahor took them wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife Milcah, the daughter of Haran, the father of Milcah, and the father of Iscah. And Sarai was barren, she had no children. And Terah took Abram his son, and Lot the son of Haran his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went forth with them from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan, and they came into Haran and dwelt there. And the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. So you have some interesting people pointed out here, and I mean they're going to be interesting. They're showing up in subsequent chapters. Abram, of course, and his wife Sarai, and Lot will go and travel with him. And so you have him mentioned here. And so you also have, again, some lifespans being written here. And to fully understand this calling of Abram that we're going to see, you have to go and read other parts of the Bible. Acts, the book of Acts, and some other passages in the Old Testament will give additional detail that aren't here. And one of them you get, I believe, is in Joshua, and it talks about how Abram's father, his ancestors were idolaters. So idolatry starts at Babel, and the whole world has been given over to it. But God's going to call out Abram to do a new thing in this period of time. So that ends Genesis 11.